Hello, everybody. Hi. How y'all doing? All right, thanks for choosing me here. I know you have many choices when you choose to fly. Go to a multi-track conference, so I'll make it worth your while. And if there are pictures of my dog in this deck, so you get to see pictures of my dog. Here's one of them. If you follow me online, I'm Lautica, but my real name is Susan, and that's Mango Roll the Shiba Inu. People who may follow me online know that I primarily post a lot about my art business. That's one aspect of me. It's my creative playground to experiment. I've done watercolor and pixel art. My latest jam is 3D art. And most recently, I've started to design my own mechanical keyboard set. So if that's something you're interested in, I love talking anyone's ear off about that. You'll see why this is relevant in a few. Earlier in my career, I prided myself in being someone who was multiverse. So I was a so-called designer who could code. And since I'm a relatively underrepresented person in tech, they call me a unicorn, whatever that means. This is my current website still, actually. It's CSS Slide at Ham, and maybe it's the coolest thing I've built. One of the earliest things I worked on in my career was I had the honor of working on Trulia's first design system. This was back in 2012, so the aesthetic may be a little dated. It was like before design systems were hot. But that was definitely one project where I got to practice a lot of these the duality of the skills I had between design and code. This is the present day. I'm currently a product design lead and manager at Cloudflare. We're the Orange Cloud company. As of now, I've worked in tech full-time for about 8 years, and before that had several internships, including maybe my coolest gig ever was doing a design intern at NASA. My team right now as a manager, I manage 5 people, and primarily I'm building a lot of processes and coaching my team to do their best work. Our greater design team is spread across 4 time zones, so we have the challenge of working across offices remotely and asynchronously, and we're embedded in a larger organization of product managers and engineers across those same number of offices. Cloudflare's audience is about 10% of all the internets, so each month we serve about 2 billion requests, so it's pretty large scale. You can imagine the opportunity, and hiring, of course, takes up a significant amount of my time. This sounds all good, right? The truth was I wasn't hired in this role not too long ago. It's maybe about 8 months, I think. I joined last October, but prior to this, I plateaued for years, and I didn't really understand why until recently. So after my second year working full-time, I hadn't really grown much as a tech designer. And I was trying to figure out why. So essentially for a while, I was just going through this mid-career crisis. Like I tried a lot of things. I switched jobs a lot. I switched teams, which of course, given the context of Refactr, you can imagine a lot of it was partly motivated by my kind of drive to figure out what was going on, but partly because, annual review will come along and they tell you that you're doing great, but they can't bump you for some reason. So frankly, switching jobs a lot was one way to get around not getting promoted. I even tried working full-time to see if I could scale my art business and traversed all those options. It wasn't until I hired a career strategist that I got unstuck. So she helped me kind of figure out that I didn't need newer, more design or coding skills, but I had to address the actual gap. And it had nothing to do with the ability to work. It had everything to do with the perception of the ability for me to do my work. So all this time I had thought I was kind of chasing my tail, trying out this art business and switching jobs a lot, but my strategist also helped me see I'm a great lead and maybe I could be a great manager, which honestly was a revelation to me because up until that point I was like, why would I want to do that? I like making stuff with my hands. I don't see myself as I think what we see as a Canon design lead, which is a very Steve Jobs type design director who's very much yeah, this is my vision and you need to do that. So one thing that I read a lot about and kind of understood of the why behind why I thought this was the manager type I couldn't be and didn't see myself as, but the reality was I could actually do this job was this concept called integrative thinking. And when I learned about this, I realized it was a fancy business term that kind of encompasses how I normally think about a problem, which is problems are very systemic. And with some piece of trivia that makes this kind of interesting is Roger Martin, the guy who kind of put together this term and the business thinking behind it, is also the person who coined the term design thinking. I know design thinking is a lot more popular, more, I guess, mainstream in terms of knowing what it is in tech adjacent industries. And it really paints that picture of an authoritative, like, creative director, which is why I was thinking, like, oh yeah, if I want to be a manager, I have to be very Steve Jobs. And that's just not something that I identify as and not my style of working. So talk a little bit more about integrative thinking. So integrative thinking is backed by extensive research that Roger and Jennifer did. Those are the two, like, co-founders of that concept. It's backed by 6 years of research across 50 different leaders. And the really cool thing about integrative thinking is I like to highlight that the participants who, like, exhibited this thinking were remarkably diverse. So they could be old or young, so age didn't matter. Verboseness was also not a factor, so some people just liked talking a bunch and some people were more play-spoken. Some people were chill and some people were not chill. And tropes like introversion versus extroversion were debunked. And if you're familiar with Google's Project Aristotle, the results from that are similar. So if you aren't aware already, Google embarked on this extensive study of their teams. And what they were hoping to find was more like a Powerpuff Girls formula where, you know, sugar, spice, and everything nice. One PhD, one extrovert, and one former founder was like the perfect team. And that's what kind of they went on this assumption to figure out, like, oh yeah, that's the perfect team. But what they found was, like, none of that mattered. What did matter was psychological safety. Psychological safety is like the highest tenet of productive and cohesive teams. Essentially, if all your teammates are able to ask questions, debate, and make suggestions knowing that whatever they said, like, their team will be receptive and essentially not make fun of them for their input, that team would perform at their best. So Google used some sales team to measure just how much impact was created when the team was psychologically safe versus unsafe. So teams that had that sense of safety performed 19% better than the baseline, and teams that had the least sense amount of safety performed 17% worse than the baseline. That's like a 36% delta. So fortunately, it's not quite the 10x stuff we hear about all the time, but like a third to like 36% is a significant lift. And you can feel that palpably when you're working with your team daily. Yeah, in light of recent news, Tim Cook praised folks for sacrificing their all for the launch. And I think that's very at least it's against the management philosophy I want to present. I think about this very old but good tweet by SageBot where, you know, the problem isn't like the work, the code, or the design, or whatever. It's about if you create this safe environment for the team, like, they can solve any problem, whether that's the actual work or, like, thinking about a team process or just, like, going through, like, mediating some conflict. So back to integrative thinking. What exactly is it? So here's the mouthful of the definition that these folks have put together. We can just go through this together, but essentially what it reads is, it's the ability to face constructively the tension of opposing ideas, and instead of choosing one at the expense of the other, generate a creative resolution of that tension in the form of a new idea that contains elements of the opposing ideas, but is superior to each. So let's look at this one by one. So things I see in this, like, giant definition, right, is you need to face things constructively. So that means that there needs to be a process to, like, disagree productively. And of course, if you ideally want to be in that diverse team or, like, have that diverse team where this is a safe place to do that, of course, there's going to be different stances people come to the table with, and there needs to be that space where people feel safe, like, talking about those different stances. So there needs to be a process that eliminates the fear of being shot down by a teammate, and one that hopefully reduces bias. Opposing ideas. So again, this is like integrative thinking is dependent on this tension, so that diversity of thought needs to exist. But of course, that enough isn't alone. The team should be taking those thoughts and including them in this new resolution. So the idea is to, like, not choose A or B, but, like, think about what makes A like a salient option, what makes B really appealing. Like, the fact that someone thinks this might be a way to solve the problem at hand means that there's something in there, right? And how can we, like, take parts of A, B, and maybe C and D and put them into a discrete output that's, like, superior to each of them? So that's integrated thinking. Sounds cool, right? But how do we use it? So great question. Let's see what it's like in practice. So I have a few examples broken into 3 different categories after this, but I know it's kind of been a long day, and here's Mango typing on my keyboard, and I know we're all like typing and writing notes all day, so this is where I usually get my audience to like do a little stretch break with me. So a few years ago, I actually hurt myself in RSI so bad they sent me to physical therapy for my arms, which was kind of embarrassing. But one of the nice things is it taught me this fun exercise where you can stick your hands out like this, and it kind of gets you a nice stretch on this side of your nerves, and you just put it down like this, and it kind of releases it. So if you do this a few times, it's kind of like the zombie dance kind of thing. It kind of helps relieve a lot of the tension all across your arms. It's always fun getting people to do this. So sometimes when I run team meetings and such, I just get people to do things like this, and it kind of helps just people settle in too. Fortunately, I can't get the dog to do that because I think she would bite me, but. All right, hiring. So I'm sure everyone in this room has probably had some part in hiring for the teams. The reality of our industry is that lots of companies are scaling fast all the time, and now it's a large part of my role today, especially now that I'm a manager. But even before I was a manager, I think my very second job, not even 1 year into working full-time, I was asked to sit on a panel and like decide if someone's going to join our team. Like, okay, cool. Like, yeah, I'm totally qualified to do this. So I'd be surprised if people in this room have not had to participate in some way. Yeah, I'm sure you've heard this too. Where is all the diverse talent? Like, why can't we keep that around? What is the big friggin' problem? I think a lot of it has to do with attitudes about hiring, that it shouldn't be so binary. So this is usually, especially earlier in my career when I didn't get any training or did any of this reading, this is kind of how I thought about people that walked in the door. Like, are you good at this job? Or are you bad at this job? And it's really impossible to quantify what exactly that means without, frankly, relying on our biases and like starting to gatekeep. So first thing that we did as a team at Cloudflare was define culture fit. Like, what does that mean for our team? And how can we create more of a nuance in the hiring process? So I always share my team's so-called secret sauce with candidates, even early in the process. I think these things are really hard to fake. So these are the things that the Cloudflare product design team specifically has defined as our top 3 non-job skills. Of course, they still have to be able to design at some capacity. But beyond that, we always look for people who are curious, they can abstract, and they're kind. And I love these things. They're called Johari windows. So essentially, you have an X and a Y axis, and you just like put each X and Y axis together to get this quadrant thing. So one thing that I use when I like train my team to think about the person they're evaluating is to like think about the skill-will matrix. Like, do they have the will to like abstract, the thirst to learn? Do they have the skill? How much training do they need? So on this matrix, highly skilled and driven people are clear shoo-in, but then you also get nuances. Like, my team personally would like prefer to extend an offer to someone who maybe earlier in the career maybe doesn't have that skill. So instead of thinking about like no skill and like has a skill, I think of it as dormant skill, kind of like a volcano. Like, they can get there. You just make sure your team has the infrastructure to like awaken that, right? And you can see that really explosive growth at some point. So for us, as a team, we prefer someone who has that high will, and then we're willing to work with that, even if they're not quite at the stage that we would ideally want them to be from the get-go. It's another Johari window. So since the last axis didn't look at kindness directly, usually I encourage people to like think about, hey, what are the few windows that they care about that kind of fit in our definition of the culture fit we want, and how could they use that to like get this painted picture of someone? And they just kind of layer them on top to get a more nuanced picture. So one thing I look for is like, do they look outwards? Do they have like self-awareness? Is this person considerate? And then do they consider themselves? Do they have the self-confidence that isn't purely ego-driven? So ideally, of course, we want considerate and confident people, but it's all a spectrum. So sometimes there's just life situations, and I think this is especially true of more diverse candidates where, you know, maybe you're just not as confident as someone could be, but that is something like, if your team is aware of this and you have the infrastructure, you can kind of coach them so that they can thrive and feel better about the work they're doing. And the last one I like using is, this really puts things in the long game perspective, right? So yes, there are like people who fit, but maybe just not now. So instead of just being like, yeah, you're not you're bad at this job, we're not going to hire you. You kind of engage in this really honest long-term discussion, like, hey, maybe not now, but here's the gap, and like if you're still like interested in us as a team or working in the future, just open up that channel and check in once in a while. So when you do layer several of these on top, your map will look like this. Sometimes you will get someone who's like clearly a shoo-in, but you get more of those nuanced people who do match your values, and you can figure out like what is the strategy behind engaging them as potential teammates in the future. And it's kind of interesting. I think giving that thorough and helpful feedback to candidates has been easier because we have these frameworks, right? And in most cases, they've been grateful to hear the specifics. Of course, one thing that I've done a lot as one of the leads on here is just write the heck down of everything I just told you. So this specifically helps, like, this is the why of why we put this effort into this. And it's also helpful to have like specific guidelines for phone screens, for example. So you're asking the same questions, and you're like constantly working on removing the bias from them. And it kind of takes the load off each interviewer to think about like, what do I ask? Oh no, I have to talk to someone in 15 minutes. So these are a few ways I use integrative thinking to like approach hiring. And it makes it a little more holistic since we're taking our mind out of the like, good at job, bad at job, and thinking about like, what exactly is this picture, and like, what is the end game, which is to really evaluate if they can get an offer now and if they're a good fit now. And then also think about the long-term strategy if that's not the case. All right, so now you've hired a team. Let's get them to work. So going back to our definition, integrative thinking really depends on multiple working hypotheses. So to generate that creative resolution, you need to have that be the case on the team. So it's kind of strange considering this other pretty well-known axiom that good design is simple. And of course, I don't necessarily disagree that good design can be simple, but I like to challenge the assumption that the thinking that good design simple came out of simple thinking. I think it's quite the opposite in reality. So simplification kind of encourages us to construct like a limited understanding of the problem before us. And sometimes you can get those really meager alternatives where like A versus B. And really the trade-off of choosing A versus B is like picking the best bad choice available versus really thinking about what makes each of those choices maybe feasible and like figuring out a C option that is a combination. And simple is deceiving because the simplest appearing interfaces are usually the most complex underneath anyway. So there's like a few abstract examples, which I'm sure some folks have run into no matter what role you are working with the designers on your team, right? Here are some recent challenges my team has faced. So we internationalized our dashboard and everything started falling out the edge of the buttons. So you can't necessarily remove characters because like it's a language, right? So how do you address your interface at scale and figure out how to adapt to situations like this? Likewise, when you have forms, it's really easy to like have a form with just 2 inputs, but as soon as you have more than that, what happens? And likewise, when you have any sort of database UI, yeah, if you have one, that's really easy to like take up all the space you need, and like, what happens when you have 10K of those same things? So another thing I like to remind the team, especially since Cloudflare itself is becoming, it always has been an international product. It's been very US-centric. 80% of the audience that visits any of the websites on the Cloudflare network is not based in North America. So one thing I like to always bring up, especially since more padding or like making things more airy, is like a very Western-centric view of like visual aesthetic. Like Clutter is seen as efficiency in information densities in other cultures, and noisy colors and patterns are like bold and striking, especially in like Eastern and Middle Eastern cultures. So not being able to hold both of these worlds as viable can really hurt the team's ability to ship a product that has that global and international appeal. So creating an environment where both of these things can be held as viable will enhance your team's ability to solve these problems at their best. And since the world is a place with an infinite number of branching paths, why settle for the A or B alternative? Take some water. Of course, hiring and working together means little if everyone on your team is constantly looking at the door thinking about how to get out. So, what are some strategies for creating a fulfilling workplace? I like using the word fulfilling better than retention, because retention makes it seem like you're trying to keep them somewhere not so savory. So think about it like, oh, how can I like get them, even if they are happy, right, to be even happier or like feel fulfilled at work? So the authors of Integrative Thinking really like the idea of a Renaissance theme. And their whole thesis is like functional specialization undermines productive architecture. I don't know why they like using all these big fancy words, but essentially it's like, there's always this tension of like, especially as teams grow, to get people to specialize. So one challenge that I really care about, especially as my team scales, I joined when there was 10 and now we have 16, and that's just constantly going to grow, right? Is how we can keep that culture of like having people who can be generalists if they choose to be, and like making sure they can always develop new skills without it hurting their career path. So a team that like balances each other out and can step in with their new point of views and their desires to learn creates that Renaissance team with a drive for that creative resolution. So more windows. You can use integrative thinking to strategically staff the needs. So one thing I think about is like how each person's project relative like to effort and visibility map to this chart. So you definitely want to put people on high effort and high visibility projects, because that's the stretch stuff that will get them promotion. But it's very dangerous to do that like all the time, because they will burn out. So one thing I definitely make sure is like they're nice projects that may be a little more low effort, but still have that visibility, and make sure everyone gets a piece of that once in a while. And of course there's like design debt and maintenance work that we all need to take part of. So just very like cognizant of like rotating that as well. So it just ensures that you have an equitable spread amongst your team, and not like the one person who wants all the shiny projects will get all the shiny projects. And another way to map this out, which kind of balances out the last chart I show, which is kind of everyone has different things that give them energy. So in addition to considering like spreading that load of debt or like the high visibility projects, really thinking about like, oh, this one in particular will give this person a lot of lift versus the other person, and just like figure out how to balance what is a huge drain for the team. And of course that maps to hiring too, right? Because if everything's a huge drain for your team, you probably want to try to get someone who's like excited about that particular problem that current team members aren't so crazy about. So the map might look something like this. So instead of being like, oh, this is a shitty project for you to work on versus a great project, it's a lot more nuanced this way too. And one way to get around like having that shiny, that magpie coworker, right, who like wants to work on all the shiny stuff and leaves their teammates to like clean up after messes, is that I believe that inclusivity has to be a core tenet in like their performance review and like career roadmap. So how can we set this up to happen? Well, here's an idea. At least for my team, this will be the case. If you don't include your teammates, you will not be promoted. So one way that product design team at Cloudflare has kind of started to take steps toward this, so we have a work in progress code of conduct. We're actually meeting up later this month to finish this up. So like the workplace is really like a conference you're at for 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. So having a shared understanding of like what the ground is really helpful. So this COC extends our company HR handbook and specifically has things that apply to UX practitioners. So eventually we'll publish it, but there's like a whole section on critiques, for example, since critiquing design work is an essential part of the job. Like how can we facilitate a critique session that people feel safe sharing work in progress ideas that are really raw and also give good feedback. So there are 3 things that I've heavily borrowed. What happened? Try the classic on and off thing. Oh, right. Where's well, the thing disappeared, but it's back online at least. Great. My notes. There we go. So these are inspired by a blog post by Chelsea Troy. There's an appendix at the end of this deck that I will share out later that has links to all these things I'm talking about too. And they've keenly observed that inclusion training really isn't enough, because without like incentive in your career ladder and performance, like why would you ever practice those skills? So these are the 3 skills I've specifically written in our work in progress product design career ladder, which is moderation, solicitation, and attribution. So moderation is essentially, if you're the owner of a meeting, like it is your job to facilitate a smooth and democratic meeting. So that includes things like if you have that one person who's just like blap, 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 off topic all the time, like as the owner of the meeting, you just kind of say like, thank you for the feedback, let's table it, let's talk it that way, like let's talk about it later, whatever. And just like be that person who owns the flow of the meeting so that, let's say, 5 other people in it get the half an hour of benefit. Otherwise, one thing I use to think about like time spent at work is people hours. So if you say have a 10-person meeting and it's an hour long, that's like 10 people hours, which makes it very expensive to have meetings that are not useful. Solicitation. So this is a skill where we want to make sure that folks are actively seeking out feedback and diverse stances. So especially if you imagine designers in their discipline, like what they're thinking through as the problem is inherently going to get colored by their view of the world. So it's really important that they get that active critique, whether it's in a group session or one-on-one, and just think about like, okay, whose perspective would really make this better for our users? And the last thing I've written up into our ladder is attribution. Just making sure that you credit your teammates and sources of inspiration that shaped your work. So it's just generally hard to find it hard to believe, especially true for designers. I'm sure for product and engineering, right? That you did that all on your own. I mean, at some point you Googled Stack Overflow, right? So here's another thing I've thought about, which is it's kind of sad that these aren't given and that they have to be explicitly defined. Because I think I know when D&I efforts will pay off is when we don't have to explicitly say D&I efforts. There just are. I think one of the problems at the core of this like attitude is that we call these things soft skills, but really they're power skills. Like they're very necessary and they make you a better teammate and I think a human being. So call them power skills from now on. So your power skills create your stance. And why do we, sorry. And that stance is how you see the world around you and how you see yourself in that world. So that's kind of what you're bringing, especially if you identify as someone who's less represented in tech. And that stance is really valuable to the team. And everyone has a stance. And your stance is mutable. So you can be really selfish at work and just like, that's an opportunity for you to inform your point of view, and like practicing inclusion is one of the ways to like make that stance even stronger. So it weaves your community and your cultures and your individuality into this like I think it's a beautiful thing. And one thing that I like to remind myself too, especially since I now manage and don't do design work as much, is that managers are people too. So your stance as someone who may be leading a team or will be leading a team will also evolve. And it's a really interesting problem since I'm not the one sitting all the like cross-functional reviews, defending my work, since my team is doing that now. And it's like, of course, to move up in that direction, one thing is because you get to scale your design thinking and your design execution. But I also think of it as like scaling organizational ability. So teaching people these things not just means like getting more work done in a synchronized way, but really thinking about like, how can we spread this philosophy of like just being really inclusive, moderating, soliciting, attributing work to our teammates, and like really grow that. So those are a few ways that I've used the philosophy of integrative thinking at work. And the one thing I think is really cool about this concept is that, like, unlike how tech normally thinks of design thinking, it's really a framework to like frame your stance in your unique context to your advantage. So that means that although these are the solutions I've come up with to like make myself more effective in my work, like the solutions you may come up with might be completely different. Thanks. That's all I have. We have 13 minutes for questions. Yeah.
back to the hiring.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we had challenges with is like typically when you go on an interview, like most everybody knows what questions or types of questions are going to be asked, so they kind of know how to respond to it. So how do you like get through that to make sure you're trying to find a good cultural fit?
Oh, I see. I think I have Wi-Fi here. I might just pull it up and go through how I think about it. So these are always changing, and I encourage my teammates to also just write it. But the way I've structured ours, at least, is always make sure to introduce myself first and tell them at the end that there will be like, oh wait, this is not on the screen. Amazing. Okay, let me move this over. I'm always pretty straightforward about like what I'm trying to get out of it. So I tell the candidate too, like, I'm not testing you. These aren't trick questions. I just really want to hear like if you would succeed at this job. So like the more candid and honest they are, the better that goes. So I always make sure to introduce myself. And the way I've structured this is there are more questions that can fit in that 17 minutes I've like held for that phone screen. So the way I do this is I go down the list of like really thinking about like, okay, specifically for the roles I interview is just designed, but of course adapted to whatever function it is. Just to think about like how they think of themselves as that person, especially since a lot of our roles bleed into each other, why they're interested in the team that at Cloudflare specifically and what they hope to get out of that. And then after I get them to walk through something in their portfolio, I might jump around after that. So specifically I listen to things like, did he hit at any sort of conflicts or challenges? Because I definitely want to hear about that. If it seems like that's been a big thing for them, there's a ton of questions to possibly follow up in that direction. If not, then I might go like a higher up level and be like, what is a hard professional situation you have to deal with if I don't feel like the project itself had any of those huge pitfalls? And one question I do like to ask, and I think it's really important for this audience, is thinking about what are your thoughts on initiatives that promote D&I in the workplace? So that answer could be really telling because it's less that I want them to be like, oh, I've solved it, and more like, I actually spent more than 2 minutes thinking about it. And it's pretty clear when someone has never thought about it. And the last thing I always close with, no matter like what specific questions I ask, is asking about what motivates the work that they do. So I guess between the script, I'm hoping, and I think I do get a sense of what the person's like, how they see themselves, why they're motivated for that role, and like how they, if they're reflective at all about like harder questions, like why they want to look for a new role, what challenges they face in the project they told me about, or like in their career in general. Yeah?
Are there any questions in here that you lean on as like a clear indicator for like one of those like Johari windows? Some of those like core values that Cloudflare has. So I know that there's something about being able to think abstractly, being kind. I was wondering if there's like any question that like is like probably your favorite and kind of discerning that.
Yeah, I do have one I usually say for the on-site, which is, tell me about a time that you're really sure about something, but someone changed your mind. So I think people who struggle, well, some people are just like, well, I'm always right, so like, no one's ever had to change my mind. That's like the kind of person I wouldn't hire. But usually people are really, the people who I feel like are a good fit, at least for my team, are kind of delighted by the question in a way. I don't expect them to be like, oh, I know right away what to answer this, because that's like not one that you come up with a perfect answer to have in your back pocket. So I use, some candidates have actually like said, why don't you think about it and we can talk about something else, get back to it in 10 minutes, and then it'll come up with something later. So it's less like, oh, I want the perfect answer. We're like, oh, okay, I've like sat here and I've really thought about what you've asked me and thought about my experiences working as a person. So I find that one to be pretty telling. Yeah?
So the code of conduct that you created there, is that specifically and exclusively for your design team, and do the other cross-functional teams that you have to work with and sometimes report to, do they have to be aware of them? Do they play a role in them as well? Like I'm thinking more specifically about engineers or maybe other writers or other people who have to be involved in the work that the design team does.
Yeah, it's currently only for the product design team. I'm trying to pull it. Oh yeah, we do have it. There's like a soft release. Oh no, it's not there anymore. Oh. T? Oh yeah, there's a missing T. Yeah, it's currently only for the product design team since getting buy-in from the whole engineering org, which is a lot bigger than our team. So we're 16, they're, I don't know, closer to 80 or sets. So if we prove out this has been an effective way to facilitate maybe some of the conflicts that will come up, then we might try to get it rolled out on a UI platform team first, since they're the engineering team we work closely with. And then think about like how to scale that elegantly. But this whole intent, of course, was to eventually have the whole tech org adopt it, but like start small and prove that it's actually effective and a useful tool. So here's like the soft version of it. We describe why we have it. We define what harassment is, and a lot of this is borrowed from Geek Feminism Wiki, which is a really great resource. And yeah, this is, again, what I just presented, but having that space for continued learning to make sure that people know that we care beyond specialization. Yeah.
So a quick follow-up question to that is, have you received pushback from those other teams who have not yet adopted this, but are probably now aware that there's a new code of conduct floating around? I guess I'm kind of curious. Code of conduct sounds like it can be a little official, kind of scary to teams who aren't aware around your intent. And I think your intent is super spot on and very admirable. But for outside teams, I can understand some resistance potentially, especially from engineers. So I'm curious if you encountered that yet at all, or if you plan to encounter it.
Definitely plan to encounter it. I'm trying to think if we've come across anything. Nothing that was like so violating it was seriously, but there's definitely like interpersonal, cross-functional, especially as a designer. Sometimes people think they can do your job because it's very visual, but the thinking and the depth of like how much work that went into it is not always necessarily visible to those folks. So it's definitely a work in progress of how to handle it. I think our current plan is to make sure that the design leads and managers on the team build really good relationships with the engineering managers and the directors of product who have people reporting to them. So at least the leadership across the board is bought into the whole idea.
Sounds like you're planning for conflict resolution, which I think is a wise.
Yeah, I think the reality of it is assuming nothing bad will ever happen is probably not the right way to go. As much as I want all the people on my team to like always get along, I know that at some point I will have to mediate something. So it's just like being consistent, being clear and as fair as possible, and hopefully like having a sense of like, okay, what in my mind will make it so that everyone comes up with the best resolution possible. And since I've become a manager too, I have my relationship with HR is really different now too. No offense to anyone in the audience who might be in HR, but as an IC, I was very skeptical. I'm very anxious anytime I got called into the office. But now I have like a regular meeting with someone on the people team, and we just talk about things like this, like what policies are they working on? What resources have we tried out already? What can we share? Like, am I thinking about promoting someone in the right way? So that's been a really useful tool, and I'm sure as we, as a team, figure out what to do with this, using that regular monthly I have with the people person is going to be one way we can get this adopted more widely. Anything else? Cool. Thanks, y'all.